You're off the project until you publicly apologize to my ex-husband. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The words cut through the conference room like a blade through silk. 60 pairs of eyes turned toward me, sitting in the back row of our monthly all-hands meeting. My wife Rachel stood at the front, her perfectly manicured hand still pointing in my direction, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she wanted to make someone disappear. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Not the fake corporate smile everyone expected. A real one. "Okay," I said. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Rachel's face shifted from triumphant to confused. She'd expected anger, maybe tears. Instead, she got 2 syllables and a grin that probably looked a little too calm for the circumstances. "That's it?" she asked, lowering her hand. "Just okay?" I stood up slowly, gathering my notebook and coffee cup. "What else would you like me to say?" "You're the CEO. I'm just the guy who built the software that's about to make you $50 million. The emphasis on "about to" wasn't lost on anyone who knew me well. Unfortunately for Rachel, that list had gotten a lot shorter lately. Jennifer from design was staring at me with wide eyes. Tom from sales looked like he was watching a car accident in slow motion. Our CTO Mike was frantically typing notes on his laptop, probably already trying to figure out the technical implications of what was happening. "David," Rachel said, her voice tighter now, "I think you're misunderstanding the situation here." "Am I?" I walked toward the front of the room, my footsteps loud in the silence. "Let me see if I understand correctly. You're removing me from the project I designed, that I built from the ground up, because I haven't been sufficiently collaborative with your marketing department. That's a gross oversimplification. And you want me to apologize, publicly, to Tyler." I glanced at Tyler Bennett, sitting in the front row with an expression that tried to look concerned, but mostly just looked smug. "Your ex-husband, who you hired 3 months ago as our marketing director. Tyler's personal history with me has nothing to do with..." "Nothing to do with what, Rachel? Nothing to do with the fact that he's been questioning every technical decision I make? Nothing to do with the private meetings you two have been having about strategic direction? Nothing to do with the consulting fees the company has been paying to his side business?" The room got even quieter, if that was possible. Tyler's smugness evaporated. Rachel's face went pale. "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." I reached the front of the room and turned to face the entire company. "But you know what? You're absolutely right. I haven't been collaborative enough. I haven't been a team player. I've been too focused on building something that actually works instead of worrying about office politics. David, please sit down so we can discuss this professionally." "We'll discuss this after the meeting," she had said originally. Now I smiled at her, the same calm smile that had started this whole thing. "No," I replied, walking toward the door. "We won't." I paused at the threshold and looked back at the room full of people who'd been watching their co-founder get professionally executed by his own wife. "By the next morning," I said clearly, "there wouldn't be a company left to apologize to." The conference room door closed behind me with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a gunshot. Let me back up 6 months. When Rachel Hayes first brought up the idea of hiring her ex-husband as our new marketing director. "It'll be fine," she'd assured me over dinner at Meridian, some overpriced downtown restaurant where the portions were small and the wine list was longer than most novels. "We're adults. Business is business." I'd nodded and smiled because that's what married people do when their spouse makes decisions that feel like small earthquakes in your chest. Tyler was everything I wasn't. Tall, confident, the kind of guy who could sell ice to polar bears and make them thank him for the privilege. "Besides," Rachel had continued, cutting her salmon into perfect squares with surgical precision, "you two might actually get along. You're both smart in different ways. Smart in different ways. That should have been my first warning sign, right there between the overpriced appetizers and the pretentious wine pairings. Rachel and I had met at MIT 5 years ago during one of those mixer events that business students and engineering students were supposed to attend to broaden their networks. She was getting her MBA while I finished my computer science degree. She was the kind of person who walked into rooms and immediately became the center of gravity. I was the kind of person who preferred the corners, watching and listening and trying to figure out how everyone else made social interaction look so effortless. "You complete me," she used to say, during those early days when we'd work late in the library together. She'd handle the business plans and market research while I coded the prototypes and solved the technical problems. It felt like partnership then, two different skill sets combining to create something bigger than either of us could build alone. By the time we got married 2 years later, she'd already convinced me to quit my well-paying job at Google and help her start TechFlow Solutions. "We'll build something together," she'd said, over champagne and take-out Chinese food in our tiny Cambridge apartment. "Something that's ours." The ours part turned out to be more complicated than I'd anticipated. TechFlow started in that same apartment with my laptop, her PowerPoint presentations, and a shared dream of creating something revolutionary in the data analytics space. I built the core software, a platform that could process customer behavior patterns in real time and generate predictive insights that actually helped businesses make better decisions. Rachel handled everything else: finding investors, attracting clients, hiring employees, securing office space downtown. Within 3 years, we had 40 employees, offices in Boston and Atlanta, and a valuation that made both our parents very proud. Rachel was featured on magazine covers as the CEO who's revolutionizing retail analytics. I was mentioned in the articles as her technical co-founder, usually in the same sentence that mentioned our golden retriever Max. "You're too humble," Rachel would tell me when I pointed this out. "You don't like the spotlight anyway. I'm just better at the public relations stuff. You know I couldn't do this without you." But somewhere along the way, without you started feeling more like a possibility than a problem. When Tyler joined the company in January, things shifted in ways that were subtle at first. Longer meetings between him and Rachel, inside jokes I didn't understand, references to marketing strategies that somehow required detailed knowledge of our technical architecture. Rachel staying late more often, usually when Tyler was also staying late. "We're just trying to nail this new client presentation," she'd explain when I asked why she was getting home after midnight 3 nights in a row. "Tyler has some really innovative ideas about how to position our analytics capabilities." I believed her because the alternative seemed impossible. We were married. We'd built this company together from nothing. She wouldn't risk everything we'd worked for just to... Actually, she would. And she was. The first concrete sign of trouble came in March, when I overheard Tyler on a phone call in the break room. "No, the technical architecture is more sophisticated than we initially thought," he was saying. "The core algorithms are proprietary, but I think there might be ways to reverse engineer the approach." I'd walked away from that conversation, feeling uneasy, but not quite ready to believe what my instincts were telling me. Tyler was marketing director. Maybe he was just trying to understand our product better so he could sell it more effectively. The second sign came when I noticed that Tyler had been asking our system administrator, Marcus, detailed questions about our server infrastructure and backup procedures. Questions that had nothing to do with marketing and everything to do with understanding exactly how our platform worked under the hood. The third sign was when I found out that Tyler had incorporated his own consulting company 2 weeks after joining TechFlow. But I didn't put all the pieces together until the night I brought Thai food to Rachel's office and overheard her discussing our deceased marriage and my inconvenient 40% ownership stake. That's when I realized that Rachel hadn't hired Tyler to improve our marketing. She'd hired him to help her steal my company. I found out about their relationship the way most people discover betrayals, by accident, and at exactly the worst moment possible. It was a Thursday night in March. Rachel had canceled our dinner plans because of what she called a client emergency, the third client emergency that week, which seemed statistically unlikely unless our customers had suddenly become dramatically more crisis-prone. I decided to surprise her by bringing Thai food to the office around 8. We'd done this kind of thing early in our relationship, back when late nights at work felt romantic instead of suspicious. The security guard, an older man named Frank who'd been working the building since before we moved in, let me up without question. "Working late again, Mr. A. Hayes?" he asked as I signed the visitor log. "You know how it is, Frank. The work never stops. That wife of yours is up there almost every night now. She's dedicated, I'll give her that." "Yeah," I said. "She's dedicated." The elevator ride to the 15th floor gave me time to think about what Frank had said. Almost every night. Rachel had been telling me these late nights were occasional client emergencies, but if Frank was right, they were becoming routine. The elevator dinged softly as I reached our floor. The lights were dimmed for evening mode, but I could see a glow coming from Rachel's corner office. I walked quietly down the hallway, carrying the bag of pad thai and spring rolls, feeling pleased with myself for thinking of this spontaneous gesture. I stopped outside her door when I heard Tyler's voice through the thin walls. "Rachel, I know this is complicated, but we can't keep pretending nothing's happening between us." I froze in the hallway, the Thai food suddenly feeling very heavy in my hands. "I know," Rachel replied, her voice softer than I'd heard it in months. "I just need to figure out how to handle David. He's not going to take this well. You can't stay married to protect his feelings forever. You said yourself the relationship has been dead for months. Dead for months." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd thought we were going through a rough patch. Apparently, Rachel had already held the funeral. "It's not just about feelings," Rachel continued. "David owns 40% of the company. If we divorce, the split could get messy, especially with the IPO discussion starting. So, what's the plan? I'm working on it. There might be a way to restructure things. My lawyer thinks we could reclassify David's technical contributions as contracted work rather than co-founder equity. It would require his signature, but if I present it right, frame it as a routine corporate reorganization." I stood there in the dark hallway, holding dinner for 2 people, listening to my wife discuss how to systematically steal the company I'd built from the ground up. "What about his technical knowledge?" Tyler asked. "Even if you can reduce his equity stake, he still knows how everything works. The algorithms, the database architecture, all of it." "That's where you come in. You've been documenting everything, right? The system dependencies, the core processes." "As much as I can without being obvious about it. But David's not stupid. If he figures out what we're doing..." "He won't. David doesn't think strategically. He's brilliant with code, but he's naive about business. He trusts people too much." Trusted people too much. Past tense. Because clearly my wife had been thinking about this for a while. I'd heard enough. I set the Thai food on the floor outside her office and walked back to the elevator. On the ride down, I felt strangely calm. Not angry, not hurt. Just clear. Like someone had finally turned on the lights in a room I'd been stumbling around in for months. By the time I reached my car, I was already thinking about contracts and signatures and exactly which documents I'd signed over the past few months without reading as carefully as I should have. When Rachel got home at 11 that night, I was sitting in the kitchen with my laptop open, reviewing every piece of paperwork from the past year. "You're up late," she said, kissing the top of my head like nothing had changed. "Catching up on some admin stuff," I replied. "You know how it is." She smiled and headed upstairs to shower. I kept reading and discovering exactly how long Rachel had been planning to destroy me. Most people don't read the fine print. That's what lawyers count on, what executives exploit, what makes the whole system work. People sign things because they trust the person handing them the pen, especially when that person shares their bed and their bank account. I spent the next 3 days reviewing every contract, every amendment, every seemingly minor restructuring document Rachel had asked me to sign over the past 6 months. What I found was elegant in its simplicity and breathtaking in its calculation. She'd been moving the chess pieces slowly, carefully. Nothing dramatic enough to raise suspicions. Just small shifts in language, tiny modifications in job descriptions and equity allocations. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. The most interesting document was from January, a routine update to our employee agreements that Rachel had asked me to sign during a particularly busy week when we were closing a major client deal with a retail chain in California. Just standard legal housekeeping, she'd said, sliding the papers across our kitchen table while I was eating breakfast and checking emails on my phone. Our lawyers want to make sure everyone's roles are clearly defined now that we're scaling up. I'd signed it without reading past the first paragraph. 20 seconds of inattention that had cost me everything. Buried on page 7, in language so dense it made tax code look like poetry, was a clause I definitely didn't remember agreeing to. In the event that a technical co-founder is terminated for cause or resigns from active project leadership, all intellectual property rights developed during their tenure will transfer to the company, with the departing co-founder receiving standard employee severance compensation. She'd been planning this since January, maybe longer. But Rachel had made one critical error. She was a brilliant businesswoman who understood markets and people and how to turn vision into profit. But she'd never been particularly technical. She understood software the way most people understand their cars. She knew it worked, but not how or why. The contract she'd gotten me to sign transferred my IP rights to the company. But according to the original incorporation documents we'd filed 3 years ago, I wasn't just a technical co-founder. I was the primary inventor listed on all our core patents. And more importantly, I'd been very careful about how we'd structured the initial software architecture. The core analytics engine, the thing that made our platform actually work, instead of being just another pretty dashboard, wasn't owned by TechFlow Solutions. It was owned by a small holding company I'd created in Delaware back when we were still operating out of our apartment. TechFlow licensed the engine from my holding company. Rachel knew about this arrangement, of course. She'd signed the licensing agreement herself. But she'd never bothered to read the termination clauses. If my employment with TechFlow ended for any reason other than gross misconduct or criminal activity, the license reverted to me. All of it. The core engine, the algorithms, the database schemas that made everything work. Without that license, TechFlow's software was basically an expensive calculator that could generate pretty charts but couldn't actually analyze anything. I printed out the relevant documents and put them in a folder. Then I made some phone calls to people I trusted, which at this point was a very short list. My first call was to James Morrison, the patent attorney who'd helped us file our original IP protections back when TechFlow was just an idea and a prototype. James was one of those lawyers who'd rather be completely honest than slightly rich, which made him terrible at corporate law, but excellent at situations like this. "David," he said when I explained what I'd discovered, "please tell me you're not thinking about pulling the license right now." What would happen if I did? Legally, you'd be within your rights. The termination clauses are crystal clear. Practically, you'd destroy your company overnight. My company? Well, technically, it's still your company too. You still own 40%. What if I waited until after Rachel terminated me? There was a long pause while James thought about this. I could hear him tapping his pen against his desk, a nervous habit he'd had since law school. "That would be different," he said finally. "If she fires you, especially in a way that violates your original co-founder agreement, you'd have every right to protect your intellectual property. And she couldn't challenge that in court? She could try, but courts generally don't look favorably on people who fire patent holders and then complain when those patent holders take their patents with them." Good to know. "David, can I ask you something? What exactly is going on over there?" I told him about Tyler, about the late-night meetings, about the conversation I'd overheard. James listened without interrupting, making the occasional note. "This is bad," he said when I finished. "If she's planning to restructure your equity without proper disclosure, that's a serious breach of fiduciary duty." Serious enough to be actionable? Serious enough to land her in legal trouble, yes. But David, if you're thinking about some kind of preemptive strike, I'm thinking about protecting myself. Just be careful. Corporate warfare gets ugly fast, and you're married to the other side. My second call was to Marcus Delacroix, our company's lead systems administrator. Marcus was a quiet guy in his early 30s who'd been with us since the early days when we had 6 employees and an office that was basically a renovated storage closet. More importantly, he was one of the few people at TechFlow who understood exactly how our software stack worked at a technical level. "I need a favor," I told him over coffee at a place downtown, far enough from the office that we wouldn't run into any colleagues. "And I need you to not ask too many questions about it." Marcus stirred his cappuccino thoughtfully. He was the kind of person who could sense storms before they hit, probably because he spent his days monitoring systems that were always about to break in new and creative ways. "This about Rachel and Tyler?" he asked. "You noticed that too?" "Hard not to. They've been having a lot of private meetings lately, and Tyler's been asking weird questions about our server architecture." "What kind of questions?" "Where we store the source code, how our backup systems work, whether we have any single points of failure. Questions that made me wonder if he's planning some kind of transition or migration." That was interesting and concerning. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing useful. I don't like that guy. He asks questions like someone who's trying to figure out how to steal something." "I need some documentation," I said. "Nothing that would compromise security or violate any policies. Just information about system dependencies and access logs." Marcus looked at me for a long moment. "You're planning something." "I'm planning to protect myself." "When do you need it?" "Soon, but not yet. I'll let you know when." My third call was to Linda Walsh, my personal accountant. Linda had been handling my finances since before TechFlow existed, back when my biggest concern was whether I could afford to upgrade my laptop. She was the kind of person who could spot financial irregularities from 3 time zones away. "I need you to review some corporate transactions," I told her. "Specifically, any unusual money movements between TechFlow and outside entities over the past 6 months." "Should I be worried?" she asked. "Probably not. But I want to be thorough." "David, you know I have to ask, is this about your marriage or your business?" "Both, unfortunately." It took Linda 2 days to get back to me. When she did, her voice had that tone she used when she'd found something that was going to make her client very unhappy. "David, you need to see this in person. Can you come to my office today?" I drove out to Linda's office in the suburbs that afternoon. She had printouts spread across her conference table like evidence in a crime drama, which was probably an accurate analogy. "Your company has been paying consulting fees to something called Hartwell Strategic Group," she said without preamble. $20,000 a month for the past 4 months. $80,000 total. Never heard of them. What kind of consulting? According to the invoices, strategic marketing advisory services. But here's the thing. She handed me a document. Hartwell Strategic Group was incorporated in Delaware 3 weeks before the first payment, and its registered agent is Tyler Bennett. I stared at the incorporation papers. Tyler had been billing the company for consulting services on top of his regular salary, and Rachel had been approving the payments. Is that illegal? Not necessarily, but it's a serious conflict of interest if he didn't disclose it properly. And if he's been using company resources to develop competing intellectual property, that would be a problem. That would be a breach of fiduciary duty, potentially criminal if the amounts are large enough. Linda pulled out another folder. But that's not the most interesting part. There's more? I did some research on what Hartwell Strategic Group has been doing with that $80,000. She spread out more documents. They've hired 3 software developers in the past 2 months, all of them former employees of TechFlow's competitors. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Tyler's building a competing platform. It looks that way, and he's using your company's money to do it. I gathered up the documents Linda had prepared. She'd organized everything into a comprehensive forensic report that would make prosecutors weep with joy. Linda, this is incredible work. David, she said as I was preparing to leave, whatever's happening at your company, it feels like people are positioning themselves for something big. Be careful. I will, and thank you. One more thing, if this goes south, if there's litigation or criminal charges, you're going to need these records to be absolutely bulletproof. They are? They are now. But David, once you use this information, there's no going back. Tyler goes to prison, Rachel loses everything, and your company probably doesn't survive the scandal. I looked at the evidence spread across her conference table. Months of careful documentation that proved Tyler had been systematically defrauding TechFlow while planning to steal our intellectual property. I understand. Do you? Because revenge has a way of costing more than people expect. I thought about that during the drive home. Linda was right. Using this information would destroy everything Rachel and I had built together. But Rachel had already decided to destroy everything we'd built together. I was just deciding whether to let her do it quietly or make sure she faced consequences. By the time I reached my house, I'd made my choice. The all-hands meeting where Rachel humiliated me was scheduled for the last Thursday of March. We held them monthly to update the team on company progress, celebrate wins, discuss challenges. Usually, they were boring enough to cure insomnia. PowerPoint presentations about quarterly metrics and client satisfaction scores. I knew something was different when I walked into the conference room that morning. The energy felt wrong. People were sitting differently, talking in lower voices. Tyler was in the front row instead of his usual spot near the back. Rachel kept checking her notes like she was preparing for a performance. The meeting started normally enough. Rachel talked about our latest client signings. We'd landed 2 major retail chains and a healthcare network in the past month. Tyler presented marketing metrics that looked impressive if you didn't think about them too hard. Our CFO, Sandra Kim, ran through the quarterly numbers with her usual enthusiasm for spreadsheets. I was sitting in the back row checking email on my phone and only half listening. We were having these meetings more often lately, and they were getting longer and less useful. I had code to review and a client presentation to prepare for next week. Then Rachel shifted gears. "Before we wrap up," she said, her voice taking on that tone she used when she was about to make someone's day much worse. "I want to address something important that affects our entire team culture." I looked up from my phone. This sounded different from the usual corporate speak. "It's come to my attention that there have been some concerns about project leadership and cross-departmental communication," Rachel continued, her eyes scanning the room. "Several team members have approached me about issues that need to be addressed openly and transparently." The room was getting quieter. People were starting to sense that something unusual was happening. "Specifically," Rachel said, "some members of our technical team have raised concerns about David's recent attitude and responsiveness to collaborative feedback." That definitely got my attention. I looked around the room to see if I could identify which members of my technical team had apparently been complaining about me. Everyone was staring at Rachel except Marcus, who was staring at his laptop screen like he wished he could disappear into it. "Rather than handle this privately and potentially create more tension," Rachel said, "I think it's important to address it transparently, as a team." Jennifer from the design team was looking at me with an expression of confused sympathy. Tom from sales was frantically taking notes. Our CTO Mike looked like someone had just told him the building was on fire. "David," Rachel said, turning to look directly at me, "several team members have mentioned that you've been dismissive of input from other departments, particularly marketing. They've also noted that you seem resistant to collaborative feedback and process improvements that could help us scale more effectively. I sat there for a moment, processing what was happening. Rachel was creating a public theater, using the all-hands meeting as a stage to humiliate me in front of our entire company. She was destroying my professional reputation as the opening act of destroying my equity stake. Furthermore, she continued, her voice getting stronger as she built momentum, your recent behavior toward Tyler has been unprofessional and disruptive. Tyler has been nothing but collaborative and respectful, and he deserves better treatment from our technical leadership. Tyler was doing his best to look uncomfortable and magnanimous, like someone who didn't want to be the center of attention, but was nobly accepting the burden of public vindication. Until you're willing to publicly apologize to Tyler for your attitude and commit to better cross-departmental collaboration, you're being removed from active project leadership, Rachel concluded. The room was dead silent now. 60 people watching their co-founder get professionally executed by his own wife. I could have played it several different ways. I could have gotten angry, demanded specifics, challenged her authority. I could have walked out without saying anything. I could have tried to defend myself by explaining what I knew about Tyler's consulting company and Rachel's plans. Instead, I smiled and said, okay. Because I'd been preparing for this exact moment for 2 weeks. The silence after I said okay was complete. Rachel had expected pushback, anger, maybe a public argument that would justify whatever disciplinary action she'd planned next. Instead, she got calm acceptance, which seemed to confuse her. That's it? She asked. Just okay? I stood up slowly, gathering my notebook and coffee cup. What else would you like me to say? You're the CEO. You've made a decision based on feedback from the team. I respect your authority. But then I couldn't help myself. The temptation was too strong. You're right about one thing, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I haven't been collaborative enough lately. I've been too focused on building something that actually works instead of worrying about office politics and strategic marketing initiatives. Tyler's expression shifted slightly. He was smart enough to recognize that my tone wasn't quite as conciliatory as my words. And you're absolutely right that Tyler deserves better treatment, I continued. He's been working so hard on his consulting projects. It must be exhausting, running a side business while trying to do his day job. Now Tyler looked genuinely uncomfortable. A few people in the room were starting to pay attention to the subtext. David, Rachel said, her voice sharper now, I think you should... I should what? Apologize? You're absolutely right. I owe everyone an apology. I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. I apologize for not paying closer attention to what was happening in departments outside my own. I apologize for trusting people to be honest about their motivations and activities. The room was getting tense. People were starting to realize this wasn't going according to Rachel's script. I especially apologize to Tyler, I said, looking directly at him. I didn't realize how much extra work you were doing for the company. All those late nights with Rachel, all those strategic planning sessions, the consulting, the documentation, the careful analysis of our technical architecture. You've really gone above and beyond your job description. Tyler was pale now. Rachel looked like she wanted to cut the meeting short, but couldn't figure out how to do it gracefully. Most of all, I concluded, I apologize for underestimating everyone's intelligence. I should have realized that people would eventually notice what was really happening here. I walked toward the door, then turned back for one final line. Don't worry about the project, I said to Rachel. I'm sure Tyler has been documenting everything carefully. He probably knows the system almost as well as I do by now. The conference room door closed behind me with a soft click. I walked back to my office and started cleaning out my desk. Nothing dramatic, just personal items, a few books, my good coffee mug. I left all the company equipment exactly where it was. Within 10 minutes, people started appearing at my door. Jennifer from design was first. David, what the hell was that about? She whispered. Change of leadership, I said, packing my diplomas into a box. Happens in growing companies. But you built the whole platform. How can Rachel just... Rachel can do whatever she wants. She's the CEO. Marcus appeared next, looking like someone who'd just watched a car accident. You okay? He asked. I'm fine. Actually, I'm relieved. Relieved? It's been a stressful few months. Maybe stepping back from day-to-day operations is exactly what I need. Marcus studied my face. You're planning something. I'm planning to go home and think about what comes next. 20 minutes after I'd finished packing, Tyler appeared in my doorway. He looked uncomfortable but determined, like someone who felt obligated to twist the knife. David, I hope there aren't any hard feelings about this, he said. Rachel thought it would be better to handle it publicly rather than let rumors and tension build up. I looked at him for a long moment. Tyler Bennett, the ex-husband turned marketing director, turned secret business partner, turned current replacement husband. He was good-looking in that generic corporate way, square jaw, expensive haircut, suits that fit perfectly because he spent more on clothes than most people spent on cars. No hard feelings, I said. You're just doing your job. I'm glad you understand. I know this is awkward given our history. History? You know, Rachel and I used to be married. I realize that makes this situation more complicated. I almost laughed. Tyler thought the complication was that he used to be married to Rachel. He had no idea that the real complication was that I still was. Not complicated at all, I said, standing up with my box of personal items. Good luck with the project. I walked past him toward the elevator. As the doors closed, I saw Rachel watching from her office doorway. She looked relieved, like someone who'd just finished a difficult but necessary task. The elevator descended smoothly toward the parking garage. By the time it reached the bottom, I was already thinking about my next moves. Step 1, go home and make some phone calls. Step 2, let Rachel enjoy her victory for exactly 12 hours. Step 3, remind her why smart people read contracts very, very carefully. I spent that evening at home, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and my laptop, working through a checklist I'd been refining for 2 weeks. It felt strangely peaceful, like the calm before a controlled demolition. At 10:30, Rachel came home. She looked tired but satisfied, the way she did after particularly successful board meetings or difficult client negotiations. How are you feeling? She asked, sitting down across from me at the kitchen table where we'd planned our company and our marriage and our future. Fine. Relieved, actually. That seemed to surprise her. Relieved? It's been a stressful few months. The pressure, the long hours, trying to manage all the technical complexity while the company grows. Maybe stepping back from day-to-day operations is exactly what I need. Rachel studied my face, looking for signs of anger or resentment or hurt. When she didn't find any, she relaxed slightly. I'm glad you're taking it well. I was worried you might react badly. React badly how? I don't know. Get angry, cause a scene, make things difficult for everyone. I'm not really the making scenes type. No, you're not. She reached across the table and touched my hand. This doesn't change anything between us personally. You know that, right? This was just a business decision. I looked down at her hand covering mine. Her wedding ring caught the kitchen light, throwing tiny rainbows across the table surface. Of course not, I said. Business is business. She squeezed my hand and smiled. I knew you'd understand. You're too smart not to see the bigger picture. I do see the bigger picture. Good, because this is really an opportunity for you to focus on what you do best, the technical development, without getting bogged down in management and politics. Right. No more management responsibilities. Exactly. You'll be able to spend your time coding and innovating instead of dealing with departmental conflicts and strategic planning. I nodded thoughtfully. And Tyler will handle all the strategic planning? Tyler has a lot of experience with business development and market positioning. He can take some of that burden off your shoulders. That's very thoughtful of him. He really is a good guy, David. I know you two got off on the wrong foot, but once you get to know him better, I'm sure we'll understand each other perfectly. Rachel went upstairs to take a shower. I finished my coffee and made my first call. Marcus, it's David. I need that favor we talked about. Now? Tonight. Can you meet me at the office in an hour? Sure. What should I bring? Just your laptop and your access cards. And Marcus? This conversation never happened. Understood. My second call was to James Morrison. James, it's David Hayes. I need to file some paperwork first thing tomorrow morning. What kind of paperwork? Termination notice for the TechFlow licensing agreement, effective immediately. There was a long pause. David, are you sure about this? Once you file that notice? I'm sure. Can you have it ready by 8 a.m.? I can, but I have to ask, what happened? I got fired today, publicly, in front of the entire company. On what grounds? Poor attitude and failure to collaborate effectively with the marketing department. James made a noise that might have been a laugh or a sigh. Well, that's definitely not gross misconduct. You're absolutely within your rights to pull the license. I thought so. I'll see you at 8. My third call was to Linda Walsh. Linda, I need you to prepare that forensic accounting report we discussed, the one about Hartwell Strategic Group's payments from TechFlow. When do you need it? Tomorrow afternoon. That's very fast turnaround. I know, but circumstances have changed dramatically. David, are you sure you want to do this? Once you pull this trigger? I'm sure. How bulletproof is the documentation? Completely bulletproof. Tyler's been sloppy about covering his tracks. If this goes to prosecutors, they'll have enough evidence to charge him with fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and probably a few other things. Good. I hung up and looked around the kitchen where Rachel and I had planned our company, our marriage, our future. Everything looked the same as it had that morning, but the context had shifted completely. Tomorrow, this would all be different. Rachel came back downstairs in her pajamas, hair still damp from the shower. You're up late, she said, just tying up some loose ends. She kissed my cheek and headed toward the stairs. Don't stay up too much longer. Tomorrow's going to be a big day. She was more right about that than she knew. Rachel? I called as she reached the stairs. Yeah? Just out of curiosity. When you fired me today, was that your idea or Tyler's? She turned to look at me, and for a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Uncertainty, maybe, or guilt. It was a mutual decision, she said finally. We both felt it was best for the company. I see. Good night. Good night. I waited until I heard her bedroom door close upstairs. Then I opened my laptop and started reviewing the checklist one more time. At midnight exactly, I sent a text message. It's time. The response came back 30 seconds later. On my way. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting. At 7:30 the next morning, I met Marcus in the TechFlow parking garage. The building was mostly empty, just a few early arrivals from the East Coast sales team and the facilities staff who came in to prep the office for the day. You sure about this? Marcus asked as we rode the elevator up to the 15th floor. Completely sure. Because once we document what I think we're going to document, there's no putting that genie back in the bottle. I understand. What I needed from Marcus wasn't complicated, and it wasn't illegal. I just needed documentation showing exactly which systems would fail if the core analytics engine went offline. A comprehensive impact assessment that would demonstrate the scope of the problem Rachel was about to face. We went to the server room, a climate-controlled space behind the main office that hummed with the sound of machines that never slept. Marcus pulled up the system architecture on his laptop and started walking through the dependencies. This is going to be ugly, he said, reviewing the system's map. Without your licensing engine, basically nothing works. The client dashboards will still load, but they'll just show empty charts. The real-time analytics, stop completely. The predictive modeling goes offline. The whole platform turns into an expensive screensaver. How long would it take to rebuild the analytics engine from scratch? Without access to your algorithms and database schemas, 6 months minimum, probably closer to a year if they want it to work as well as what you built. And what about all the client implementations that depend on real-time data processing? Marcus winced. Those would have to be suspended until the rebuild is complete. Clients would probably demand full refunds or terminate their contracts. The company would basically have to stop operating. I took screenshots of the dependency charts Marcus showed me, documenting exactly which systems relied on the analytics engine. By 8:15, I had everything I needed. Marcus, I need you to do me one more favor. At exactly 9 a.m., I want you to run a full system diagnostic. Document everything that fails when the analytics engine goes offline. You're really doing this? I'm really doing this. David, you know this is going to destroy the company. No, this is going to destroy Rachel's ability to steal the company. What's the difference? The difference is that I built this company, and I can rebuild it. But I'm not going to let someone else profit from stealing my work. Marcus looked at me for a long moment. You've changed. No, I've just stopped being naive. At 8:30, I was sitting in James Morrison's office, signing the license termination paperwork. This goes into effect immediately? I asked. As soon as I file it with the State Corporate Commission. Should be active within the hour. And Rachel will be notified how? I'll send formal notice to TechFlow's registered office address. Certified mail, signature required. I checked my watch. 8:45. Do it. James pulled up the electronic filing system on his computer and started uploading documents. David, I have to ask, are you prepared for the consequences of this? What consequences? Rachel's going to fight back. She'll probably sue you for breach of contract, intentional interference with business relationships, maybe even try to claim you're violating some kind of non-compete agreement. Let her try. She'll hire expensive lawyers. This could get very ugly very fast. I have expensive lawyers too. And I have something else. What? I pulled out a copy of Linda's forensic report and set it on James's desk. I have evidence that Rachel's marketing director has been defrauding the company while building a competing business. James flipped through the first few pages of the report. His eyebrows went up. This is comprehensive. It's also completely documented and legally bulletproof. David, if this is accurate, Tyler Bennett is going to prison. That's not my problem. And Rachel? Rachel's going to learn that actions have consequences. James finished filing the termination notice and printed out confirmation copies for both of us. It's done, he said. License terminated effective immediately. Notice filed with the state. Formal notification sent to TechFlow. Thank you. David, one more time. Are you sure about this? I'm sure. At 9 a.m. exactly, I was sitting in my car outside the TechFlow building, drinking coffee and watching the windows of Rachel's corner office. My phone was set to silent, but I could see notifications piling up on the screen, missed calls, text messages, emails marked urgent. At 9:07, Rachel appeared at her window. Even from the parking lot, I could see her gesturing frantically. She was on her phone, probably talking to Mike about why every client dashboard in the system was suddenly displaying error messages. At 9:15, my phone rang. Rachel's number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, 30 seconds later. Voicemail again. At 9:20, James Morrison called me. It's done. License terminated, notice filed, formal notification sent. As of right now, TechFlow has no legal right to use your analytics engine. Thank you. David, you realize this is going to create complete chaos for them? I realize that. Rachel's probably trying to call you right now. Probably. Are you going to answer? Eventually, when I'm ready. I watched Rachel pace back and forth behind her window, her phone pressed to her ear, her free hand running through her hair. Even from a distance, I could see the panic setting in as she realized the scope of what was happening. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Call me now! System is down! Clients freaking out! What did you do?" I finished my coffee and started the car. Time for the next phase. By 10 a.m., my phone had 17 missed calls from Rachel and 12 text messages ranging from confused, "What's happening with the system?" to panicked, "Call me immediately," to threatening, "If you don't fix this right now, I'm calling the lawyers." I didn't call back. Instead, I drove to Linda Walsh's office to pick up the Hartwell Strategic Group forensic report. Linda had clearly worked through the night. When I arrived, she looked like someone who'd been drinking coffee and staring at financial documents until the sun came up. "This is worse than we thought," she said, handing me a thick folder bound with a rubber band. "Tyler's been very busy." I sat down in her conference room and started flipping through the documentation. Linda had organized everything chronologically, building a timeline of Tyler's activities since joining TechFlow. Hartwell Strategic Group isn't just billing TechFlow for consulting services, she continued. They've been developing their own data analytics platform. Using what resources? Based on the financial records and some additional research I did, they've hired 3 software developers in the past 2 months. All of them former employees of TechFlow's competitors. All of them specialists in real-time data processing. That was interesting and concerning. How do you know they're building an analytics platform? Because Tyler was sloppy about operational security. Linda pulled out another folder. Hartwell Strategic Group has been paying for cloud computing services, database hosting, and software development tools. The spending pattern is identical to what a startup would need to build an analytics platform from scratch. But building it from what? They don't have access to our algorithms or database schemas. No, but they have access to our client list, our pricing structure, and our marketing materials. And Tyler's been documenting everything he can about your technical architecture. Linda showed me screenshots of cloud service bills, payments to freelance developers, and licensing fees for software development tools. Tyler had been systematically building the infrastructure to compete with TechFlow while using TechFlow's money to pay for it. Is this actionable? Oh yes. It's a clear violation of his employment agreement, non-compete clause, conflict of interest, misuse of company funds, breach of fiduciary duty. Take your pick. What about criminal charges? Wire fraud, definitely. Possibly money laundering if prosecutors want to get creative. Tyler's been systematically stealing from TechFlow to fund a competing business. That's a federal crime. My phone buzzer with another call from Rachel. This time, I answered. "Where are you?" she demanded without preamble. "Having coffee. What's wrong?" "What's wrong? The entire system is down. Every client dashboard is showing error messages. Our CTO says something happened with the licensing for your analytics engine." That sounds serious. "David, what did you do?" "Nothing. I was fired yesterday, remember? I'm not involved in technical operations anymore." "Don't play games with me. This has your fingerprints all over it." "I don't know what you're talking about. Fix this. Right now. I can't fix it. I don't work there anymore. Remember? Attitude problems and failure to collaborate." There was a long pause. I could practically hear her brain working through the implications. "We need to talk," she said finally. "About what?" "About how to resolve this situation." "What situation? I thought Tyler was handling all the strategic planning now." Another pause, longer this time. "David, please, come to the office. We can work this out." "I'm busy today. Maybe some other time." "This isn't funny. Our clients are demanding answers. The board is asking questions. If we can't restore service..." "I'm sure Tyler can help you figure something out. He's been documenting everything, right? All those late nights, all that careful analysis of our technical architecture." "David..." I hung up and turned off my phone. Linda was watching me with a mixture of admiration and concern. You know she's going to figure out what happened eventually. Of course she will. That's part of the plan. And then? Then she's going to have to decide what's more important, her pride or her company. What if she chooses pride? Then she loses everything, and I rebuild the company without her. David, are you sure you've thought this through completely? I looked at the evidence spread across Linda's conference table, months of careful documentation that proved Tyler had been systematically defrauding TechFlow while planning to compete against us. Rachel's signatures on documents that showed she'd either been incompetent or complicit. I've thought it through. Once you use this information, there's no going back. Tyler goes to prison. Rachel's career is destroyed. Your company probably doesn't survive the scandal. Linda, let me ask you something. If someone was stealing from you, if someone was systematically planning to destroy everything you'd worked to build, what would you do? I'd probably want to stop them. That's all I'm doing. I'm stopping them. By destroying everything? By making sure they face consequences for their actions. I gathered up the forensic report and put it back in the folder. Thank you for this. It's exactly what I needed. David, promise me something. What? Promise me you'll think about whether the revenge is worth more than the relationship. Which relationship? My marriage ended the moment Rachel decided to steal my company. My business relationship with Tyler ended the moment he decided to defraud us. I'm not destroying relationships. I'm just acknowledging that they're already destroyed. I left Linda's office and drove home. It was time for the next phase of the plan. At 2 p.m., a black BMW pulled into my driveway. Rachel got out, followed by Tyler and a man I didn't recognize. Expensive suit, briefcase, the predatory confidence of someone who charged $1,000 an hour to make problems disappear. I opened the front door before they could knock. Rachel, Tyler, and you must be the lawyer. David Hayes? The lawyer asked, extending his hand. I'm William Kensington from Kensington, Ross & Associates. We represent TechFlow Solutions. Congratulations. What can I do for you? Kensington had the kind of handshake that was designed to communicate authority and slight intimidation. He was probably in his 50s, with silver hair and the bearing of someone who'd won a lot of courtroom battles. Mr. Hayes, he continued, it's our understanding that you've taken some action that's disrupting TechFlow's business operations. I terminated a licensing agreement. Perfectly legal. Legal, perhaps, but potentially in violation of your employment contract and fiduciary duties as a co-founder. I stepped aside and gestured them into the house. Please, come in. Can I offer anyone coffee? Water? Rachel and Tyler looked like they wanted to skip the pleasantries and get straight to the threats. Kensington seemed more interested in sizing up the opposition and gathering intelligence about my state of mind. We settled in the living room where Rachel and I had planned our wedding, our business strategy, our life together. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mr. Hayes, Kensington began, pulling out a legal pad. My clients are prepared to offer a reasonable resolution to this situation. I'm listening. Rachel leaned forward in her chair. We'll restore your project leadership position immediately. Full technical authority, no interference from marketing or any other departments. And you restore the analytics licensing immediately. Today. I pretended to consider this. What about my public apology to Tyler? Tyler shifted uncomfortably. We can skip that. Water under the bridge. How generous. I turned back to Kensington. Is that the full offer? My clients are also prepared to discuss equity adjustments that better reflect your technical contributions to the company. Equity adjustments? Rachel spoke up. We could restructure things so you own 60% instead of 40%. You'd be the majority shareholder. It was a good offer. Too good, which meant they understood exactly how much trouble they were in. That's very generous, I said, but I'm not interested. The room got quiet. Rachel's face started to flush. David, she said, her voice getting sharper, be reasonable. You're destroying the company we built together. No, I replied calmly. I'm protecting intellectual property that belongs to me. There's a difference. Kensington opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document bound in blue legal backing. Mr. Hayes, if you don't restore the licensing agreement voluntarily, we'll be forced to seek injunctive relief. On what grounds? Breach of fiduciary duty, intentional interference with business relationships, violation of your co-founder agreement, possibly extortion. I took the document from him and skimmed the first few pages. It was a competently written lawsuit, but it had some fundamental problems. This is interesting, I said, but I think you've misunderstood the legal situation. How so? I stood up and walked to my home office, returning with the folder James Morrison had prepared. Because according to the original incorporation documents, I'm not just a co-founder. I'm the primary inventor on all core patents. And according to the licensing agreement Rachel signed 3 years ago, I can terminate the license at will if my employment status changes. I handed Kensington copies of the relevant documents. Your lawsuit claims I'm violating my fiduciary duties as a co-founder. But co-founders don't typically get fired by their own companies for attitude problems. Kensington was reading the documents, his expression getting more serious with each page. Furthermore, I continued, your extortion claim is particularly interesting, since extortion requires a threat to do something illegal. Terminating a contract I have every legal right to terminate isn't illegal. Rachel's face was getting red. You planned this. You've been planning this whole thing. I planned to protect myself if something like yesterday happened. And something like yesterday happened. Tyler finally spoke up. This is insane. You're going to destroy everything over a workplace disagreement? I looked at him for a long moment. Tyler Bennett, the ex-husband, turned marketing director, turned secret business partner, turned current replacement husband. Tyler, I said, how's Hartwell Strategic Group doing these days? The color drained from his face. Rachel turned to stare at him. What's Hartwell Strategic Group? She asked. I pulled out Linda's forensic accounting report and set it on the coffee table. Hartwell Strategic Group is Tyler's consulting company. TechFlow has paid them $80,000 over the past 4 months for strategic marketing services. What TechFlow didn't know is that Tyler was using that money to build a competing analytics platform. Kensington was reading the forensic report, his expression getting grimmer with each page. Is this accurate? Rachel asked Tyler, her voice dangerously quiet. Tyler looked like a man who'd just realized he was standing in a room full of gasoline while holding a lit match. It's not what it looks like, he said weakly. It looks like fraud, I replied. Breach of fiduciary duty, theft of company resources, wire fraud. Should I continue? Rachel was staring at Tyler like she'd never seen him before. You were building a competing platform, using our money? Rachel, let me explain. Explain what? That you've been stealing from the company while I was paying you to steal from the company? Kensington was reviewing the forensic report with the expression of a lawyer who just realized his clients had lied to him about some very important facts. Mr. Bennett, he said, is this documentation accurate? Tyler was sweating now. It's complicated. No, I said. It's not complicated at all. It's fraud. And when Rachel hired you to help her steal my company, she became an accessory to your fraud. What are you talking about? Rachel demanded. I pulled out my phone and played the audio recording I'd made the night I brought Thai food to her office. Rachel's voice came through clearly. David owns 40% of the company. If we divorce, the split could get messy, especially with the IPO discussion starting. I'm working on it. There might be a way to restructure things. My lawyer thinks we could reclassify David's technical contributions as contracted work rather than co-founder equity. The room was completely silent except for the sound of Rachel's recorded voice explaining how to steal my equity stake. You recorded us, Tyler said. I documented a crime in progress, I corrected. Kensington was putting documents back in his briefcase. Mr. Hayes, I think we need to reassess this situation. I think you do too. Rachel, he said, standing up, I'm going to need to speak with you privately. Immediately. But I wasn't done yet. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Mr. Kensington, you're going to take your lawsuit and tear it up, because if this goes to court, Tyler's activities are going to become public record, and so is Rachel's recording. I turned to Rachel. And you're going to decide what's more important, your pride or what's left of your reputation. What do you mean? I mean you have two choices. You can fight me in court, watch Tyler get arrested for fraud, and spend the next year explaining to prosecutors why you were planning to steal intellectual property. Or you can accept that you made a mistake, and we can discuss terms. Terms for what? Terms for your resignation. Terms for Tyler's termination. Terms for how we handle this without destroying what's left of the company. Rachel looked around the room like she was seeing it for the first time. Her lawyer was clearly planning his exit strategy. Her boyfriend was staring at his shoes. Her husband was offering her a way out that would cost her everything she'd been working toward. What kind of terms? She asked quietly. We'll discuss that tomorrow. Right now, I think you all should leave. Kensington stood up first. Mr. Hayes, this isn't over. Yes, I said, walking them to the door. It is. After they left, I sat in my living room and looked around at the house where Rachel and I had planned our future together. Tomorrow, that future would be officially over. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The next morning, I drove to TechFlow for the first time since being fired. The parking lot was unusually full for 9 a.m., probably an emergency all-hands meeting to explain why their employer had suddenly stopped functioning. I used my key card to get into the building. Nobody had thought to deactivate it yet, which was either an oversight or a sign that Rachel was hoping I'd come back to fix everything. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt different now. 3 days ago, this had been my company too. Now it felt like visiting a crime scene. Rachel's assistant Jennifer looked surprised to see me. David? I thought you were… Rachel said. Is she available? She's in a board meeting. Emergency session that started an hour ago. I'll wait. I sat in the reception area and checked my phone. Marcus had sent me a text. System still down. 3 major clients threatening to terminate contracts. Board meeting very loud. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see Rachel at the head of the table, gesturing emphatically at a room full of middle-aged men in expensive suits. The board of directors, probably trying to understand why their 8-figure investment had turned into a very expensive paperweight overnight. Tyler was nowhere to be seen. At 10:15, the conference room doors opened and board members filed out, looking like mourners leaving a funeral. One of them, Patrick Richardson, our lead investor, stopped when he saw me. David, good to see you. Patrick. Hell of a mess, isn't it? Seems like it. You know, when Rachel told us about your performance issues, some of us wondered if there was more to the story. I didn't respond to that. Patrick was fishing, trying to understand what had really happened and whether there was a way to salvage the situation. Anyway, he continued, I hope you'll consider helping us resolve this situation. The company needs its technical leadership. I'm sure Rachel and Tyler have it handled. Patrick's expression darkened. Tyler Bennett is no longer with the company as of this morning. Neither is William Kensington, for that matter. That was faster than I'd expected. I see. Rachel will want to speak with you, Patrick said, sooner rather than later. The last board member left the conference room, and Rachel appeared in the doorway. She looked like someone who'd spent the night staring at the ceiling, wondering how her life had gone wrong so quickly. David, she said, thank you for coming. We went into her office and closed the door. Rachel sat behind her desk, but she looked smaller somehow, like the events of the past few days had physically diminished her. The board wants to know what it will take to fix this, she said without preamble. Fix what? Don't. Her voice was exhausted. Please don't make this harder than it already is. I sat down in the chair across from her desk, the same chair where I'd signed contracts and discussed budgets and planned the future we'd thought we were building together. What happened to Tyler? The board terminated him immediately when they saw your forensic report. They're considering whether to file criminal charges. And Kensington? He withdrew from representing the company. Conflict of interest, he said. And they've made it clear that if we don't resolve the licensing issue within 24 hours, they're going to replace me as CEO and potentially pursue legal action against me personally. Rachel looked out her window at the city skyline. From her office, you could see the harbor, the financial district, the buildings where other companies were having their own crises and celebrating their own victories. You won, she said quietly. I didn't want to win. I wanted to build something together. Then why did you do this? I thought about how to answer that. There were a dozen responses I could give, about betrayal, about humiliation, about being systematically marginalized in the company I'd helped create. Instead, I told her the truth. Because you forgot that I was smart enough to protect myself. Rachel turned back to look at me. So what happens now? Now we negotiate. What do you want? I want the licensing agreement restored under new terms, 70% of licensing revenue to me, 30% to TechFlow. That's almost everything. That's fair compensation for building almost everything. What else? I want Tyler's case turned over to prosecutors. I want a formal board resolution acknowledging that my termination was improper, and I want you to resign as CEO. Rachel's face went white. David, you can stay as a board member if the board allows it. You can keep your equity stake. But you can't stay as CEO. Why? Because you proved you can't be trusted to run a company ethically. The silence stretched between us like a bridge neither of us wanted to cross. And if I refuse, she asked finally, then I keep the licensing agreement terminated. You lose the company anyway, and Tyler definitely goes to prison for fraud. Plus, the recording of our conversation about stealing my equity gets turned over to prosecutors as evidence of conspiracy. Rachel put her head in her hands. You really thought this through. I had to. You were 3 steps ahead of me for months. I needed to get 4 steps ahead of you. She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married, brilliant, ambitious, but also capable of recognizing when she'd made a fundamental mistake. The personal stuff, she said. Between us. What happens to that? We're getting divorced, but we can handle that separately, quietly. No drama, no public fights, just paperwork. You're really done. I was done the moment you decided to humiliate me in front of our employees. Rachel nodded slowly. How long do I have to decide? The board gave you 24 hours. I'm giving you 12. I stood up to leave. David, she said as I reached the door. Yeah? I'm sorry. For all of it. The recording, Tyler, the way I handled your termination. All of it. I looked back at her, sitting behind the desk in the office where she'd planned to run the empire we'd built together. I know, I said. But sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't change what you were willing to do to me. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you hate me now? I thought about that question. Did I hate her? The woman who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my bank account while planning to steal everything I'd worked to build? No, I said finally. I don't hate you. But I don't trust you. And I don't love you anymore. And that's probably worse than hate. Yeah, she said quietly. It probably is. 11 hours later, Rachel called me. I accept your terms, she said. All of them? All of them. Including the resignation? Including the resignation. When? I'll announce it to the board tomorrow morning, effective immediately. And Tyler? I've already turned over all the documentation to prosecutors. They'll probably arrest him next week. Good. There was a long pause. David? Yeah? I hope you can rebuild the company into something good, something better than what we had. I will. That afternoon, I sat in the same conference room where Rachel had fired me, watching her address the board of directors for the last time as CEO. Effective immediately, she announced, reading from a prepared statement, I'm stepping down as Chief Executive Officer of TechFlow Solutions. She talked about new challenges and fresh perspectives and the need for leadership that could guide the company through its next phase of growth. Corporate speak, for I got caught, and I'm leaving before you destroy me. Patrick Richardson thanked her for her service and announced that the board had unanimously appointed me as interim CEO while they conducted a search for permanent leadership. I didn't want to be CEO. Running a company meant dealing with investors and boards and quarterly reports and all the administrative machinery that I'd helped Rachel build specifically, so I wouldn't have to deal with it. But I wanted Rachel not to be CEO more than I didn't want to be CEO myself.